Have you ever played a game of FIFA where it feels like the game is just working against you? Where nothing you do seems to be working out, but everything your opponent does seems to be coming off perfectly? Well, you are not alone. This is a way more common problem than you'd think. Tons of people every year complain about scripting and handicap and momentum and morale, but what does any of this mean? In today's video, we're going to break down each of these components and what they mean to you as a player and what you can do to minimize them as much as possible the next time you play a game of FIFA. Guys, before we jump in, I just want to clarify one thing as a disclaimer. This is just my personal opinion as to what I think is going on with the game code. This is not a vendetta or a personal issue or matter against EA. I haven't worked there in over 10 years, but I have some great friends who still do, and I wish them nothing but the best and nothing but the best for this game and this community because I love this game. I have a lot of fun playing it. I don't want to see it go anywhere, so I'm not trying to push anyone in any directions here. This is just what I believe is happening with the game code, whether it be deliberate or by accident. Coding is a very complicated matter. It takes a lot of skill to do it, but there's a lot of moving parts with it. So I just want people to look at this video with an open mind and consider what is going on with the actual game, and if this can help them get the best out of their team, then that's what this video should be used for. Now, a little bit of background information, guys, on who I am and what qualifies me to talk about this subject. My name is Mark, the FUT founder, and the reason that I use that screen name is because I actually worked on the original FIFA Ultimate Team. I worked for Electronic Arts in their marketing department in their offices in Burnaby from 2005 to 2009, and the final project that I worked on was FIFA Ultimate Team 09. Now, this was an innovative, revolutionary idea for us because it was the first project that we launched that used microtransactions, and I had a whole lot of fun working with the team in Burnaby there to see this to market. Now, the reason I bring all this up is not to talk about my time at EA, but more to talk about my account. And why this account is important is because it establishes a timeline for us in this video. This account is a FUT founder status account. It was established in 2009 and is actually the same account that I used during my time at EA that I still use today to create my other series, the Founder Academy. Now, why that's important is because I left in 2009. So what that shows is during those 12 years, I have been playing all of my Ultimate Team games as a consumer, getting the content that you guys are getting, seeing it at the same time you're seeing it, and playing the exact same game. So I'm not just some guy that picked this up yesterday and is trying to act like he knows what he's talking about. I have insight from a development side into what goes into creating this product, as well as a consumer who's played tens of thousands of games. So what is a handicap? In order to better define handicap, I'm going to refer to the dictionary section on Google to help me out with this. Google defines handicap as a circumstance that makes progress or success difficult. Why this is so perfect to me is because this seems to be almost an exact definition of what many players feel is almost a seemingly unstoppable force that seems to help one team while negatively impacting another. What you're seeing on your screen right now are all the sliders associated with an offline Play Now game within FIFA. Every offline game mode within FIFA will utilize sliders when determining the success rate of an action in game. These sliders not only affect the actions of the human-controlled players, but also all the elements of not only the 11 players on the computer's team, but also the 10 other computer-controlled players on your team. Whether it be attributes pertaining to passing, shooting, physical stats, or general offensive and defensive IQ like off-the-ball runs, every factor in the decision-making of the players takes into account the slider's positioning when determining the outcome of an action in the game. Now, the assumption within FIFA Ultimate Team is that when playing an online game, both you and your opponent will start with its sliders in an equal placement, so you each have a fair 50-50 chance of winning that game. However, certain factors within the Ultimate Team game mode design result in this not always being the case. For example, team chemistry. When your team has extremely low chemistry, the players are punished from an in-game standpoint and their sliders drop, thus having an adverse effect on their in-game performance. Now, many believe that at just face value, the only way that a card gets punished for having low chem or low team chem is that its stats get diminished. However, there's a huge subsect of people in the FIFA community, including myself, that believe there are other factors that diminish the card's performance in-game. Now, team chemistry does not have a direct correlation to handicap unto itself, However, the mechanics that are used to negatively affect teams that have low chemistry are very important in this case. The first major theory surrounding handicap pertains to teams that are too highly rated. The theory is that when a team with an extremely high rating matches up with a team that's below the threshold, the higher rated team will get nerfed in order to create a more, quote, even playing field. The second major theory I'm going to explore in this video is the concept of morale. Morale, for those that are unaware, used to exist in older iterations of FIFA Ultimate Team. When players were on low morale, they would play increasingly worse in-game until either victories would improve their status or a team or player morale card was used on that item. EA removed this as a face card feature several years ago. However, many believe that its existence in the game code still plays a factor on teams going on long losing streaks within FUT. Within recent years, a theory has surfaced amongst the community online surrounding the in-game engine. This concept is called Dynamic Difficulty Adjustment, or DDA. The idea is that during gameplay, in-game actions such as possession, shots on goal, and goals scored dynamically move the in-game sliders during the course of a match, impacting the outcomes of actions. In recent years, this theory has resurfaced aggressively online amongst the community as many feel the addition of custom tactics to FIFA have massively impacted the dynamic difficulty adjustment and become an abused method for more advanced online players. For example, when a player changes his in-game tactics to ultra attacking with team press, his entire team will become more aggressive and attack ball carriers with an almost unpreventable relentlessness in effort to create turnovers. One of the major frustrations regarding the addition of custom tactics surrounds the fact that many feel not only do they impact the play of the team applying the tactic, but also massively diminish the abilities of the opposing team. These types of issues surrounding its addition have created a level of frustration amongst the community due to the fact that many feel the level of skill required to win a game has been massively diminished and computer assistance overwhelmingly impacts results. While the idea of a handicap may not necessarily provide the user automatically with a win or loss, the hypothesis in this case is that players who have a team with a rating too high will either begin their matches at a disadvantage or suffer aggressive dynamic difficulty swings throughout the course of a match greater than normal. EA have never confirmed that handicap is in the game, so it can't exist. My answer to this argument has always been quite simple. Why would they? There's no benefit to EA Sports addressing an issue in-game that would only cause problems for the development team and their executives. For my years of working in the marketing industry, including my years at Electronic Arts, the concept of staying silent is consistent with most companies' corporate PR approach. Proactively addressing issues that would only shine them in a negative light would do nothing but hurt the company. The idea of a handicap doesn't prevent EA from making money. In fact, as I'll talk about in a minute, the concept of having a handicap in FIFA could, if anything, benefit them financially. Why would EA put a handicap in their game? Although the idea of handcuffing a player in-game seems like a ludicrous thought at first, the rationale behind a handicap is actually simpler than you'd think. The reason is accessibility. If you're familiar with this term, then this won't come as any surprise to you, but for those that aren't, we'll break it down here. If we look at the entire FIFA player base in a pie graph, ignoring the numbers they're just made up, let's just say 25% of players are hardcores. They're most likely the type of people to be watching a video on handicap. For the sake of this discussion, we'll call them Ultimate Team players. These players are going to come back every year and buy FIFA and potentially purchase FIFA points, regardless of the quality of the game, because their brand loyalty and love for the sport is the highest of any user group. The middle group are moderates. They generally purchase the game every year but may not be as engaged as Ultimate Team players because of the hardcore nature of the player base and the perception of it being pay to win. They're more likely to play the other game modes within FIFA like career mode or clubs, and they have a higher volatility than the hardcores, but generally are likely to come back year over year. EA view these users as potential hardcores, and converting them further through the marketing funnel is a priority to EA in order to increase their average lifetime value. Finally, you have the remaining 25%, which we'll call casuals. These are the guys that will only purchase FIFA once every couple years. They don't need a footy game every year, and they need some form of hook or a new game mode to entice them to buy it. EA are most concerned about this user group because if you look at the basic economics, in order to increase their stock price, EA need to grow year over year. If they lose these casuals and some moderates, the size of the pie decreases and their stock price goes down. That's why EA generally put resources towards game modes like the Journey and Volta. These are casual game modes targeted towards the casual player. They're generally offline based and easy to play, making it simple to pick up and learn for new and casual players. So what does any of this have to do with Handicap? If we look at the marketing funnel, Volta and the Journey are what EA used to get casual players buying and playing FIFA. As the player progresses along the funnel into more difficult game modes, the final stage is FIFA Ultimate Team. In this mode, users spend the most money through microtransactions and have the highest average lifetime value of any FIFA user. In order to get a player to the stage where they're dumping money into Ultimate Team, EA need to ease the player's mind that putting money into FUT is not just a money pit and they will have a realistic chance of winning games. Players do not go straight into the deep end and throw down hundreds of dollars in today's market without knowing what they're getting themselves into. If a player simply goes into games with their low-rated gold or silver teams and gets beat 10-0 every time they play a game, they'll leave and never return. If skill-based matchmaking was ever an indication as to why evening the playing field is more important than ever to retain players, look no further than the massive growth year over year of the FUT game mode. So the next time you ask yourself why they would give a competitive advantage to a low-rated team, take a look at who's playing with that team. Good gameplay versus bad gameplay. This is a common complaint amongst the FIFA community, which I will never understand. The concept of good gameplay versus bad gameplay to me never made much sense. It's understandable to think that some players may be experiencing server issues that impact their gaming experience, but the concept of gameplay changing from one moment to the next is no more ludicrous than the existence of a handicap itself. Fix your servers! Although servers may cause connection issues, there's little to no proof that this directly impacts the game coding itself. From my experience, server issues and connectivity have a lot to do with the server's locations. Internet service quality, bandwidth strain, and the amount of devices using the location's bandwidth can all affect the player's gaming experience. All of these factors can cause issues such as input delay and speed-up lag, but this should not be confused with how these factors impact the result of the match versus what we're talking about today. Pros can beat the handicap. Even though I generally don't disagree with this statement, I don't necessarily want to agree with it either. Pros are still affected by handicap morale and DDA just like everybody else. The fact that they're able to overcome these restrictions more often than the average player has more to do with their level of skill rather than the existence of the factor itself. What makes professional FIFA players exceptional at their craft is their ability to break down the components of the video game, minimizing risk while maximizing the use of advantageous tactics within the game's code. Their ability to use the game's meta better than their opponent more often than not is the reason they're able to overcome these factors and still pull off wins. However, as you'll see in the video later on, this isn't always necessarily the case. I lost, it's handicap. Many who believe in the idea of a handicap sometimes confuse this with what's referred to in the community as scripting. Scripting is conceptually based around the idea that one player is guaranteed to lose a match regardless of how they play in game. Although scripting has its own set of advocates, I don't believe personally that there are elements within the game code that would guarantee a win to one party versus another. Handicap as a concept in this case is not about giving someone a guaranteed win, but more so restricting elite players with elite teams in order to even the playing field when the game's code perceives the team advantage as too great. Again, this is done in effort to slow down highly rated teams from discouraging newer casual players from returning to the game mode. Although handicap does not directly cause the result unto itself, it can impact the outcome of a game depending on how aggressively the momentum sways in one opponent's favor. Before we jump into the gameplay, I've jotted down a couple key points I'd really like people to watch for in these examples. Rather than refer to factors surrounding items that can be easily contested, for example a poor pass which people will just say, you shouldn't have passed to that guy, I've noted down items mainly surrounding factors that appear to impact your team's performance when they're getting handicapped that aren't necessarily based around human error. Now please note, not every single clip is going to showcase exactly all of these items. These are just a few of the many that impact your team's performance. Players running offside in key attacking positions. When you have the ball approaching the final third, watch for the amount of times your strikers or wingers will run into offside positions, especially when the passing lane opens up for them to be passed to. Ragdolling. This pertains to physical challenges that your players will lose and then crumble to the floor or fall off balance, taking them completely out of the play. Magnet ball / immaculate ball retention. Players bouncing off opponents and retaining ball possession with indescribable ease. Underhit passing / wayward passing. Underhitting passes that allow defenders more time to lock on and intercept or tackle the recipient. Also, watch for high-rated passers conveniently making passes that bend towards or go directly to opposing players. CPU players abandoning passing lanes and assignments. When on defense, players are forced to switch players constantly in order to drag them back into position in order to prevent open passing lanes for their opponent. CPU players standing around / not identifying passing lanes. When attacking, CPU players are standing around and making no effort to get open for you. CPU players hiding behind defenders. Similar to the last point, but they make a conscious effort to hide behind defenders so you don't have an option to pass to them. CPU control players taking away space. A fundamental basic of football is don't take away the ball carrier's space. In many examples, you'll see players run towards you, pull defenders towards you, or run directly in front of you in order to restrict ball movement. Overcompensating on missed tackles / ice skating. Defenders don't lock in, and when trying to jockey or run players down, defenders will take 2 or 3 extra steps too far in order to take them completely out of the play. Balls bouncing off player models / brainless player activity. Very common for handicap teams. Players don't lock in or identify ball location and resemble a drone with no artificial intelligence programmed in. As we jump into the gameplay, we're going to be looking at 3 examples of matches that we'll dissect at length to determine if there's external factors at play that impact the in-game performance when playing online. The first 2 matches are going to be from my own gameplay. The first game will be showcasing how morale heavily diminished my team's performance in a recent game of division rivals after suffering consecutive losses prior to the match. The second, a classic case of handicap. However, this time in my favor, where it was my opponent's team that was heavily impacted across the board in one of my most casual victories ever while using a series of downgraded players. The third game comes to us courtesy of former FIFA eWorld Cup champion Huge Gorilla. Spencer has generously agreed to allow us to use his footage to break down a recent match where he suffered an infamous loss at the hands of what many consider to be handicap in its purest form. The first match we're going to be taking a look at is one of my most recent games from this past week in Division Rivals. A few notes to set the stage here. Firstly, this match was played midweek during the midst of the Summer Heat promotion, so despite this being a Division 4 game, I was coming up against an abnormal amount of Division 1, 2, and 3 level players. I cannot confirm what division my opponent usually plays his games in. However, from my experience playing against some very high-rated players in FUT Champs and Rivals, my opponent felt relatively par for the course in terms of quality of a Division 4 player. One of the reasons I mention the Summer Heat factor is because it helps explain a lot about the psyche of my team. Whereas I normally perform at about a 2-to-1 win-loss ratio in Division 4, this past week I've been closer to a 1-to-1 or even a 1-to-2 ratio with the amount of players dropping divisions in order to play weaker opponents to complete these objectives. A strange abnormality that I've been finding frequently in my gameplay as of late is that I've been going on these extremely long runs of wins and long runs of consecutive losses. Now, I've been a big proponent that morale is still in the game code, and if this game is any indication of that, I believe it was the 8th game in a row where I either drew or took a defeat to an opponent that I'd otherwise feel confident getting a result from. Despite the fact that at first I believed I was just coming up against tougher opponents due to the recent timing of these objectives, I found that my team's performance was getting increasingly worse as every game passed. A plethora of offsides riddled a healthy majority of my attacks whenever my team would get forward. Midfielders and attackers would bomb forward at lightning speed into offside positions, and only after 10 or 15 yards past the final defender would a teammate check their run and finally saunter back into onside positions. My team were labored and predictable with every possession I would have trying to get out my own third. As driven passes and crossfield attempts were simply run down by heat-seeking attackers, any slip-up or conveniently misdirected pass was punished by my opponent, whose shots were flying in from all angles. As you can see, my defenders struggle to keep shape, and attempts to stay face-up to my opponent's attackers are met with slippery feet, overcompensating one way and then the other. As the game went on and my opponent continued his offensive onslaught, my desperate attempts to generate any sort of pushback became increasingly more difficult. Despite common factors like player fatigue diminishing their abilities, These elements explaining player performance seem to massively impact my team's play, yet did not appear to slow down the relentless attack of my opponent whatsoever. As goal after goal rang up the score in perhaps the most lopsided defeat I've endured in the last 12 years, clips like this showcase the utter lack of control I suffered from my players. Feeble attempts by my defenders to dispossess ball carriers are either met with balls bouncing back to his attackers or complete avoidance to dispossess ball carriers whatsoever. Wild swings of overcompensating by my defenders, such as Alex Telles here, gave me the feeling that I was playing a game of NHL rather than FIFA. Despite this being a landslide defeat, this match required more concentration and effort defensively than most. I felt like the entire match I was required to constantly change players, pulling them back into position in an effort to keep them goal side of ball carriers. Defenders would simply not lock into challenges, and even when my positioning was good, my opponent's attackers would seemingly walk past my endgame defenders as if reminiscent of a pylon from a training ground exercise. Little to no attempts were made by my defenders to intercept passes. Physical challenges were met with on-rushing attackers simply skipping past opposition, and wild lunges plagued every defensive stand I tried to make. As you can see in this clip, no effort was made by my opponent to even attempt a skill move or to be elusive. Walking pace was enough to foil my defenders and get a shot in on goal. When I was finally able to generate enough offensive pressure to create a chance on goal, my freshly substituted Paulo Dybala was coincidentally found to have run offside. Even then, his labored shot on goal struck the post and conveniently bounced back to what would have been a keeper collection. An 8-0 final was an over-exaggerated result. Defeat to this opponent was clearly the order of the day, but the scoreline I felt was not reminiscent of the gulf in class between the two division rivals opponents matching up in this Division 4 game. Severe restrictions surrounding my team's morale hampered what could have been a more competitive matchup. As we head into this second match, I'd like to preface this by showcasing the lineups that both myself and my opponent are using for the game. I was in the midst of doing the 89 rated Summer Heat Ferland Mendy objective that required me to use 6 French players in my lineup. Rather than fork out big money to purchase high rated meta cards, I opted to use several cheaper options that I had in my club in order to just play out these games. As I wasn't required to win any of the matches, I wasn't concerned with the quality of lineup that I was using in order to complete this task. Note that my team overall rating is a 186. As we see my opponent's team, vastly different in terms of the quality across the lineup. An entire squad of 90 plus rated Team of the Season, Flashback, and Summer Heat cards, capped off with a 93 rated Prime Icon Ruud Gullit centering his midfield. A 194 overall, and comparatively to my team, leaps and bounds in terms of quality in almost every position. Straight off kickoff, we're immediately faced with a midfielder showdown to my on-rushing attacker. After good positioning and a well-timed tackle from my opponent's 96 rated Luka Modric, my Kevin De Bruyne is allowed to casually skip past and generate an attack to my opponent's back line. As you can see, not only does his Modric not dispossess my player, my midfielder actually warps out of the tackle, is allowed to collect the ball and carry on, while his player flies out of position, putting him behind the play. In this clip, a lovely 1-2 between my opponent's Team of the Season Insigne and his 96 rated Modric gives my opponent a fast break opportunity. I'm freezing the clip here in order to showcase the amount of room that his Modric has to play the ball into, also the fact that his Insigne has more than a step on the defender after my high risk guess left me exposed at the back and very vulnerable to a through ball down the line. However, against seemingly all odds, my Mendy is able to miraculously turn on a dime and within 10 to 15 yards cover the ground required to intercept Modric's underhit and wayward pass. A simple 1-2 between Henderson and Pogba creates a long shot opportunity. However, upon closer review, a combination of a massive overcommitment from Ruud Gullit and a well-positioned Jerome Boateng leaning backwards allowed a half chance from distance to appear more dangerous than it should have been. Just a perfectly timed challenge, nothing to see here. An entire series of magnet ball here. No real thought on my behalf during almost any of this clip. My players were retaining possession with little to no effort on my part. Two simple passes cut through his entire midfield and defense, giving me a scoring opportunity. Watch his defenders stand around, and more notably his Luka Modric who actually moves back and out of the way to create the passing lane for Rashford to run into. The halftime stats are telling of the story so far. 58% possession in my favor was a simple accomplishment in what I can easily say was the least amount of effort I've had to put into a game of division rivals all year. Effortless passing on my part cut through his 90 rated plus defenders at ease, while his attacks were labored and slow, making them easy to read for my base goal defenders. Some of my trademark left stick dribbling has Boateng on ice skates. The massive overcompensation of his center back clearly shows a lack of control my opponent was experiencing when trying to defend. A simple lob through ball is misguided out of bounds by prime icon Ruud Gullit. After a mindless lack of control from his Riyad Mahrez, the ensuing throw-in gives me the opportunity to counter. Some signature FIFA 20 wing play leads to Adama Traore running at his defenders. A running fake shot taking his defender completely out of the play, and a simple ball roll is only stifled by a desperate last-ditch slide tackle that I was clearly not expecting. A through ball to 99 Robert Lewandowski is easily cleaned up by Rafa Varane as the attacker makes seemingly no effort to retain ball possession. My opponent's first clear-cut chance on goal of the match happens to be conveniently squandered courtesy of an offside run by his Lorenzo Insigne. With only minutes remaining on the clock, my team bombs forward in one final last-ditch attack. After an ill-timed pass by my Dybala evades interception by not only one but two of his defenders, I've been given the chance to recycle possession and attack off the right-hand side. Some simple left-stick dribbling leaves his Ruud Gullit and Alphonso Davies on ice skates, and a simple ball into Messi and a left-footed in-swinging shot to the near post results in defeat for my opponent. Post-match, I messaged my opponent to wish him a good game and tell him that I felt his team was handicapped heavily, which impacted the result of the match. When he asked me what I meant, I continued to share with him my theory on team rating. I used his Ruud Gullit as an example of a player who is widely regarded as one of the best in the game, but yet had seemingly no impact against my base gold rares. I was surprised to hear when he shared with me that this type of performance was par for the course, and his Gullit, who at times would appear to be world class, would have shocking performances when coming up against bronze bench teams. In the end, I can't speak to the quality of my opponent based solely on the fact that he built a great team, but what I will say is this. At this stage in FIFA, you're not just coming up against anybody's in Division 4. Although I was happy with the result, I was left more confused than anything by the fact that my lowly rated gold rares would outperform my full team of the season backline so noticeably. This final game is one that I've been looking forward to doing for this video. This gameplay package is from Huge Gorilla's stream this past Friday. Thank you again to Spencer for allowing us to use his footage here. For those of you who may not be familiar with Gorilla, he's a former FIFA eWorld Cup champion, consistent top 100 player, and overall widely regarded as one of the best FIFA players on the planet. Now before we jump into the gameplay, I want to go through the teams to kind of set the stage for what we're watching here. So this is Gorilla's team, a 1-9-1, filled with prime icon moments and team of the season players. I believe he was doing a past and present Milan squad. But as you guys can see, Ronaldinho, Kaká, Seedorf, Zanetti, Nainggolan, Lautaro Martinez, that defense is very solid. This is not a team that should be bullied by anybody and generally regarded as an endgame team. Now for his opponent's team. So obviously not what many would consider a meta squad. He does have some endgame players in there, including Perisic, Kessie, Botius, but some odd choices. He's got Felipe Coutinho's one to watch out of position. He's got Rashika's shapeshifter, and that backline is definitely leaving something to be desired. So at the end of the day, you still have to play with whatever team is on the field. It's not always up to the team, but comparatively to Gorillas, when you're playing a top 100 player and a former World Cup champion, it's not necessarily going to give you the most competitive advantage when you're using a team this low rated. Now I did a little research on his opponent, Mr. Stefan 81. He's currently ranked 1066 on the leaderboards on Xbox One, and he finished on 12 wins this past weekend. Now, telling you guys that is not about exposing him for being a good or a bad player. It's very likely that he's a much better player than I am. But I wanted to tell you guys that because I want to set a bar for the quality of opponent that Gorilla's facing in this. Gorilla is obviously a top 100 player and former world champion, but the opponent he's coming up against does not have any visible record of being a pro or top tier player. It's very possible he's an elite player due to the fact that they're being matched up, but from a competitive FIFA standpoint, at the moment he's a relative unknown. Now, as you guys saw, his opponent already jumped out to a 1-0 lead essentially right off the kickoff, and Gorilla comes down off of his kickoff and gets a bit of a boost from the kickoff boost, and we are all square at 1. Nothing really out of the ordinary so far besides 2 quick goals. Now, as Gorilla's on the attack, it's not uncommon for him to set a really high line. He generally is regarded as one of the best attackers, not always the best defenders in the pro scene, so it's not uncommon for him to leak goals. However, he does like to play very aggressively in the final third, so as you guys are seeing here, he's trying to be very elusive. It's one of his trademarks, but watch the blocks that the defenders are going to make. Now, these might seem very insignificant, but as the game goes on, you're going to see this become more of a trend. Now, as the opponent counterattacks, it's one touch, one pass, long ball, right into Perisic, touch, and a goal. Very simple, very easy, not totally unheard of from watching his streams to see him get countered like that, but definitely something that is going to become a trend as this game goes forward. Now, if we break down this opportunity, one of the things that I want you guys to notice is the computer auto-blocking the shot. Now, as he passes into Cannavaro makes the turn, and watch the defender warp in a position and block that shot. Now, he wasn't expecting the ball to drop to Kessie, so he panic hits pass, but it wrap passes it around to Alexandro, the through ball to his other player, and he's away. Now, why that block is so important is because it allowed the breakout to happen, one through ball, one pass, and they're away, and now his opponent's up 2-1. One of the trademarks of the pros is their ability to be very prolific in the final third. A great little through ball here to Ronaldinho, but it's smothered by Sepe, and now his opponent's counterattacking. This whole sequence is very telling. What I'd like you guys to watch for is the amount of times the ball magnet balls back to his opponent's players. After some lucky bounces, a through ball is played, and after a show of Herculean strength, his Perisic bounces through 3 tacklers and is provided a lane to have a shot on goal. When we slow this down further, I'd like to draw your attention to Gorilla's 2 players in the midfield. After controlling each, both players hop out of the ball carrier's way and move themselves out of the passing lane, giving the midfielder a second chance to complete the pass. A through ball is played to Perisic, and despite excellent body positioning, no attempt is made by Cannavaro to tackle the ball away from the rushing attacker. A Theo Hernandez tackle warps Perisic past the wingback, and despite both Prime Moments Blanc and Team of the Season Theo Hernandez having decent body positioning, inexplicably both defenders miraculously move out of the way, giving the opponent a clear-cut scoring opportunity. Now on the ensuing corner, the ball is swung in and Gorilla's defender heads it out. Now it bounces back to the 81 rated informed defender who plays this magical ball on his weak foot, and next thing you know, he's counterattacking. Now watch the fluidity in which these passes are made. There's almost no interruption. They're all first time. There's no real thought put into it. And then seemingly as if magical, the ball just bounces back to his player. One-time pass, and he's up 3-1. Now slowing this play down, I'm going to pull up Jonathan Schmidt's card stats off of Futbin. Even with the Shadow Chem style played on him, this card still only has 77 composure, 72 long passing, and a 3-star weak foot. Now, seemingly against almost all odds and his body's complete momentum, he makes this magical pass completely across field under duress, which allows his opponent to collect, turn upfield, and hit him on a break, creating another scoring opportunity. As his opponent goes forward, I'd like to draw your attention to how seemingly thoughtless the passing appears to be in this sequence. There's no attempt to collect passes and no effort to be elusive in the final third, 2 very common characteristics of top-tier FIFA players. Every pass is made under duress, yet hit with almost 100% accuracy. When Gorilla finally dispossesses his opponent, his attempt to make a simple pass to the midfielder is conveniently dispossessed, and with one double tap, his opponent is able to volley home, making the game 3-1. The disdain on Gorilla's face tells the whole story of the game so far. As we reach the middle of the first half, I'd like to draw your attention to 2 key factors that became very prominent within the gameplay. Firstly, Gorilla's players were turning the ball over at an abnormally high rate in what would usually be very simple passes for his playstyle. Secondly, His players, predominantly as midfielders and attackers, were losing almost every physical challenge they engaged in. As you can see in these clips, his opponent's defenders were flying into tackles at an almost 100% success rate, and they were dispossessing Gorilla's players all over the field regardless of the circumstances. In what can only be described as a perfect analogy for the first half, a lovely ball into prime icon Ronaldinho and a drag back with an AI-assisted block shot can only be upstaged by a mindless team of the season Raja Nainggolan, allowing the ball to bounce off his body for a goal kick to his opponent.
What is going on? Like, no, seriously, lads, like, it does feel like something's happening here.
A direct attack from Gorilla straight into Ronaldinho with a signature Elastico brings the game back to 3-2 just before the half. Some sloppy play from both parties, a series of giveaways means that we're going into the halftime break at 3-2. A very odd topsy-turvy first half, but all to play for in the second. As the second half begins, this sequence shows a real lack of control that Gorilla's team is featuring when defending his opponent. His defenders overcompensate one way and then the other, allowing lanes to open for his opponent to make high percentage passes uncontested. The sequence is capped off by a final pass inside, then a back heel from his opponent. The no-look pass miraculously finds its way through a crowd of 4 defenders, all of whom appear to make no effort to attempt an interception. The opponent is dispossessed, but only due to a thoughtless turn directly into Laurent Blanc. As Gorilla's team bombs forward, a pass to Kaká is available on the inside. I'm pausing the video here to show not only the touch Gorilla takes to avoid turning into the defender, but also the body positioning taken by prime moments Kaká in order to place himself between the ball and the oncoming defender. As the play resumes, the opponent's 81 rated Schmidt casually dispossesses the Milan legend, knocking him off balance and out of the play, allowing for yet another unopposed counterattack. Yet again, we see an opportunity to play a ball on to prime moments Kaká, giving him a one-on-one with a defender in the opponent's area. However, like previous efforts, despite Gorilla's attempt to do a scoop turn collect, Kaká takes a heavy touch and is easily dispossessed. He acts as no more than a pylon and makes no attempt to intercept the breakout pass. His opponent is allowed out of his backfield for an uncontested counterattack. In a series of progressively underhit passes, we see how the attacking game speed gets massively nerfed, providing the opponent more time to collect his thoughts defensively and read the developing play. This series of low-powered underhit balls is capped off when lunging St. Justi flattens Ronaldinho, causing him to stay on the ground in a complaining animation. When the ball is lazily turned over by his opponent for overplaying out the back, we see once again a Gorilla attack fizzle out almost effortlessly by his opponent's on-rushing Romagnoli. Patient hold-up play with Ronaldinho at the center gives Gorilla an opportunity to wait for the oncoming midfield support. A simple outlet pass to Nainggolan, a ball roll, and an angled finish ties the game at 3 with 30 in-game minutes remaining. A Gorilla attack with Ronaldinho down the wing creates a threatening opportunity. Some nice ball control along the byline leads to what normally would be a high percentage cutback to a trailing attacker. However, once again we see the opponent's defender not only dispossess the ball carrier with great comfort, but also knock him off balance and into a physically disadvantageous position, taking him right out of the play. A simple pass out of the back leads to a completely ridiculous switch of play to the wingback. A give and go with Botius then allows for a ball in behind. Once again, another absurd seeing eye pass bypasses 2 of Gorilla's icon defenders and gives him the opportunity to swing the ball wide for a potential goal scoring chance. An in-swinging lofted through ball from Ronaldinho leads to an unimpeded volley opportunity. Despite matching the desirable timing and power on the shot, Gorilla's prime moments Kaká inexplicably overruns the ball, leading to a guided header that falls painstakingly wide of the target. Another poorly controlled pass from the freshly substituted 90 rated Zlatan leads to a lost physical battle, off-balance reaction, and easy outlet pass. As we head into extra time, a fresh Rebic takes an oddly heavy touch, then a disrupted pass which leads to a dangerous Gorilla turnover. After a risky yet well-timed tackle, Gorilla's players have the opportunity to break out on the counter. A free ball is there for the taking, however his players get into a strange physical entanglement with each other and it leads to an ill-timed pass and yet another turnover. In what many would only explain as a series of unfortunately one-sided events, a rushed pass from the opponent leads to a gorilla breakout. After several efforts to utilize the L1 speed burst, Gorilla's Kaká is being ran down ferociously by Summer Heat Kessie. After opting to turn back and reset, a nice L1 layoff with Team of the Season Theo Hernandez gives Kaká the entire left side of the opponent's half to play the ball into. A conveniently overhit through ball is tracked perfectly once again by the ever-present Jonathan Schmidt. Upon dispossessing Kaká, his opponent nonchalantly turns the ball inwards directly towards a clueless Kaká, who once again appears to be more pylon than player. A crossfield pass and easily won contested header leads to a perfectly weighted high-arcing lob in behind Gorilla's defenders. A generous bounce, a warping touch, and then a random right stick flick leads to all of Gorilla's defenders running around aimlessly. With a sea of defenders protecting the opponent's goal, we see a series of painfully low-powered passes as Gorilla's team tries to work the ball forwards towards goal. Despite a patient build-up, the final ball into Zlatan is frustratingly all for naught as he unintelligently turns ball first, giving the defender an easy dispossession. Another perfectly threaded through ball, this time with Alexandro's 3-star weak foot, gives the opponent a break down the left. A glitch touch past Team of the Season Nainggolan leads to a pass inwards towards the on-waiting Perisic, who takes a shot that Samir Handanovic can only parry to end the first half of extra time. After some nice build-up play, a chance breaks for prime Ronaldinho. Despite waiting out the defender, the 5 yards of extra space created is rapidly closed down within milliseconds, and despite the 94 rated Brazilian's insanely high rated attacking stats, an uncharacteristically heavy touch means the chance is once again gone. With 9 in-game minutes remaining, the next goal is critical. An aimless, desperate lob from his own third is ludicrously rewarded when, despite being bullied by 94 rated Prime Moments Cannavaro, Emmanuel Sabi miraculously emerges with the ball. He then lays off to a trailing Bodius, who easily skips past the off-time Theo Hernandez lunge and powers a shot past Handanovic.
And it's not a coincidence that this is a shocking team, and all of this is happening. I'm sorry, but there's something in this game.
A calamity of errors riddles Gorilla's team. A series of stepovers that confusingly release the ball mid-animation, a delayed pass, and then 2 computer-assisted AI blocks leads to wasted attacks and valuable time burned off the clock. Once again, frustratingly effortless passing leads to his opponent counterattacking. 2 simple through balls rip Gorilla's team apart, bypassing 7 players along the way. A rushed pass is not punished as the ball magnets back to his opponent and gives him a second chance to play a through ball down the left. Only a last-ditch slide tackle from Samir Handanovic saves the 5th goal from bulging the net. One last attack from Gorilla is developing. His opponent desperately slide tackles from behind in effort to stop any final attempt on goal. Good work down the wing gets the ball into Rebic as he patiently waits along the byline for a trailer to emerge. A perfectly timed pass to a trailing Zlatan 10 yards out directly in front of goal seems like a guarantee. However, despite a well-timed and perfectly weighted shot, the ball shockingly sprays wide and goes out for a goal kick. Gorilla's reaction tells the whole story. So how do I, as a player, minimize the effects on my team in-game? Handicap. For those that choose to believe in the idea of a handicap as a function of team rating, the best way to counteract its effects is to bring your team's rating down. Where I found the largest swing in performance is when your team's rating is at 183 or lower. Note that team rating is calculated by your squad's overall in the top left corner as well as the team's chemistry. An industry trick to bring down a team's overall rating is to bronze bench the team. Where possible, utilize 48 and 49 rated overall cards to see a drop in your team's rating. If you're finding a 183 is too challenging to achieve, go with the lowest possible team rating while fitting in the players you wish to use. The lower the rating, the greater the impact when playing higher rated squads. For those that choose to not believe in the idea of a handicap, at the very least, lowering your team's rating will also affect its ELO when matchmaking for online games. It's my belief that the team rating highly impacts the quality of your opponents you're matching up with, so bringing the ELO rating down would be greatly affected by lowering your team's overall team rating. Morale. If you've drawn or taken multiple losses within the last few matches, take your team to offline modes and beat the computer. The more matches you've lost, the greater the handicap affects your team. The more victories you get, the better they'll start to play. Note that you can still get the same effect if you win these games in online modes. However, this is going to be much more difficult as you're playing these matches against online human players, so your team will be playing with a greater disadvantage. My personal method of choice is playing squad battles. Not only am I helping my team get out of their days, but I'm also accumulating points towards rewards on a Sunday evening. Although the idea of a handicap is a very polarizing topic, the concept of its existence has been directly tied with Ultimate Team for the better half of a decade. Many of its detractors have dismissed the idea either due to a lack of proof directly from EA or a misunderstanding of what exactly the concept encompasses. In many earlier iterations of FUT, the idea of a handicap was way more prevalent. For example, silver teams in FUT 12 were widely regarded as receiving massive boosts versus full gold teams. I remember my Serie A silver team, they were unbeatable. However, as time wore on, the general cry of "I lost, it must have been handicap" began to water down what many people believe is legitimate issues surrounding fairness in the gameplay. These crutch arguments of blaming every loss on handicap began to lead to its detractors rolling their eyes at even the thought of hearing about its existence. Despite handicap becoming a topic many feel has been left by the wayside, the idea of its existence has never really gone away. With FIFA 20 towards the end of its life cycle, the topic has once again become relevant as high-rated Team of the Season and Summer Heat cards flood the market, driving team ratings higher than at any other point within the FIFA life cycle. Even with its many detractors, you'll be hard-pressed to not tune into any content creator's live stream without some form of controversy surrounding the team massively underperforming as compared to their team rating. From game to game, the consistency of the players on the teams seem to change so drastically that players are left scratching their head in befuddlement. As time goes on, the debate continues amongst many in the community that there are other factors at play. Many turn to blanketed statements like, "Who cares, it's just a video game." However, with thousands of young aspirational players choosing content creation or FIFA esports as a viable career path, the idea that these tools required to ply your trade are not on the level is simply inexcusable. Even though I'd like to believe the concept of a handicap no longer riddles this game, bringing emotional distress to the millions who play it every day, every time I pick up my controller, the gameplay seems to validate my belief. But what do I know? I'm just some guy playing a video game.